Welcome r/Prorevenge. I got fired. Employers' lawyers should have done their homework. I did. I got a job basically office sitting on weekends. I showed up at 8 AM, and every hour I checked over things, handled the occasional phone call, and then left when the 4 PM person arrived. Most of the time I read, watched TV, or played games on my laptop. I probably worked no more 10 minutes of every hour, unless something went wrong. It went on like this for years. The pay was decent, holidays were double pay, and I even had opportunities to cover weekday shifts when others were sick. One day while I was covering the midday shift, my boss asked me to come into his office. He told me that the evening weekday position was going to become available that night. He offered me the position, which I accepted. I was told to punch out and return at 5 PM that night. The reason it went down like this should be obvious. Things went okay for a while. I showed up at 4 PM, did the normal things, and then left at 12 AM when my relief arrived. It was a little more work, more call volumes, etc. Then, after 9 months, things started to go south. The daytime person developed a huge attitude problem and went from a nice person to a total Karen. She would complain about everything I did. For example, one time a system jammed up at a remote site and she called them. 5 hours later I saw the jam was still there, so I called that site again to see if they were still working on it or if something else was wrong, because the woman on our end, who would be the one to help them, was leaving soon. They did have a problem, and so I hooked them up. My reward for making sure the problem got solved and not having to bother an upper level employee at home on a Friday just after having left work. I got yelled at because Karen complained that I had apparently ignored her log entry about the issue. My defense was ignored. The boss had me highlight important things on the log to verify that I had read them. Things plodded on for a while with this new normal. I tiptoed around Karen when needed, thankful for the fact I only had to deal with her for no more than 5 minutes. I did the stupid highlighting thing and my log entries started getting more and more detailed, even referencing Karen's calls when I had to follow up on an issue that crossed shifts. The firing. The following summer, just after I crossed year mark, I went on vacation to visit some friends out of state. When I got back, after about a week, my boss came down, after everyone had left, and had me describe how I did a certain task which involved certain updates. I explained to him how I did it and so forth. He then told me that I had not been doing it at all, and that he was firing me. I had transposed the date code of the English file for the French file, which was the previous one. The newest one had already been applied anyway, so nothing was wrong. It was just a reason to get rid of me. So I left the office. My state is an at-will employment state, which means that I can quit at any time for any reason and my employer can terminate me at any time for any reason. The only exceptions were state and federal laws such as race, religion, etc. I thought I was screwed. So I just started applying everywhere I could. During my job search I happened to accidentally stumble upon a link about employment law. Out of curiosity I read it and discovered that my employer had shot themselves in the foot. In the employee handbook, there was a job security clause. What this stated was that they would never lay us off, and such if our jobs were eliminated, we would simply be retrained and sent to fill an opening elsewhere in the company. It sounds good, but it resulted in them cooking up reasons to fire people to get around it. But their fancy high-priced lawyers had missed something. In my state's laws, the ones passed by the legislature, I was screwed because of at will. What they neglected was case law, the ones determined by courts. This site cited a case from the state's Supreme Court that had ruled that a job security clause waived at will on the employer side, turning it into a just cause relationship. This means that they had to have a real reason to fire me. The revenge. With that in hand, I sought out a lawyer. After my consultation with her, I set about collecting my evidence. My former boss did not realize that I knew more about this program than he did, seeing as I ran the same software on my own computer and laptop. I experimented. The date of the file, which they tried to use against me, is baked into the version 2. I was able to demonstrate to my lawyer that if I applied the same update over and over, which my former employer stated would change the date every day, would, in reality, display the date of the file. I showed this by backdating my own copy by a year using the update archive available from the vendor. Next, I showed her how the task used to be automated. A script would snag the file and process it every day on its own. A change on the vendor's site broke the script. It was an easy fix, but no one bothered to do it because the guy who had wrote it retired. The fix involved deleting 3 characters on one line in the script. The task was also marked as only being a weekday task. In my firing I was told how important this update was and so forth. If it was so important, why was it not done on weekends or holidays? The vendor pushed out updates on those days too, as I showed my lawyer the one from Christmas morning. And why had the automation not been fixed? With all that in hand, she contacted them. After presenting them with the law they broke and all the evidence I had collected, they were forced to settle with me. So in the end, their fancy high-priced lawyers did not do their homework. I did. Thank you to the wonderful librarians I have known in my life who taught me my information literacy skills. They paid dividends in this case. TLDR, I got fired by a large corporation and though I had no recourse. Then I found out their lawyers missed something in my state's laws and forced them to pay me. Edit 1. Obviously the terms of the settlement are confidential and a fake still in effect. It was a good portion of my salary though. I did also get unemployment during this time as well. I never found out how the reaction went down as the main corporate office that would have dealt with it was in another state and I never had any contact with those people. I imagine a new handbook was issued before they cut my check though, so I feel bad for those who remained. Karen's fate was sealed about a year later. I saw a Facebook post by a former co-worker mentioning that his job with them had ended, so I asked for details. The company experienced a huge loss in revenue. As a result, Karen lost her job as the site I had worked in was closed. Of about the 50 of us that worked in that office, only 10 or so were moved to another location. Thankfully most of the ones I liked were old enough to retire. It did not take a genius to realize that my termination was simply a layoff disguised as a firing. My brother had a somewhat similar situation. His boss brought him into ours to fire him without cause. My brother had a 3-year contract and was only about halfway through it. The boss neglected to file it with ours, but my brother had it and sent it from his phone to ours. It had the boss signature. Now ours hated the boss and told him there was nothing they could do. My brother could be let go, but they had to pay out his contract, which was well over 6 figures, which they did in monthly installments. My brother could also collect unemployment, which he did. As he had no mortgage and his wife also had a high income, he just used the unemployment for spending and added the settlement to savings. He spent a few months going to the movies and goofing off until he got another job. The UK has some pretty strong worker rights at work we call it, but the amount of companies that take advantage of employees and actively break those rights is fucking insane. It's either because the employee themselves doesn't know what their rights are or doesn't want to cause a fuss. I have a friend whose place of work kept saying that, although the Equality Act 2010 clearly states that they are classed as disabled and are to be treated as such, the company refused to do so by saying company doesn't class this as a disability. It took me about 6 months to convince my friend to take it further as the company was actively breaking the law. Once they did though, it took about 2 weeks to resolve and the company managers got put in their place. Now the company has all these extra things they have to do for them, way beyond what they were originally asking for. So I'd hate to imagine the shitable companies in the US and other places can get away with. I second this. No need to mention a dollar amount, just something like 3 months pay or whatever. Also a minor update/edit about the tone or reaction of the management when being informed of their bungle or when handing over the payment would be great. Also any updates about Karen and whether she's changed her ways or being her same old delightful self to the new person in your job, etc. I know you won't definitely have access to this sort of thing, but just anything little comment you might have experienced or anything you might have heard in passing from a former colleague, etc., since it would add much more to the emotional payoff of an otherwise great story. I hate people who try and stick it to you for no good reason other than they're so shit they have no other way to try and sling mud at everyone else. I worked in a factory where I shared duties with one other person. This was a shift pattern where we continually alternated. One week Monday to Friday, the following week Friday to Sunday. We were paid overtime on anything we did extra, even 15 minutes on the end of our shift. Now I'm not a charity and I ain't a snitch, unless I've good cause. See, the woman I worked this pattern with would moonlight at a bar, picking up the odd shifts, to complement her regular pay. I was, in effect, doing similar to volunteering at a place where I could hobnob with the folks in the industry I was trying to get into. The issue was, this woman would regularly pick up the Thursday shift, which was a really busy karaoke night, and, by her own admission, an early-ish finish, which meant she could get pissed with the regulars after. Weirdly enough, she seemed to have a lot of sickness on Fridays, especially after she'd worked Monday, Thursday. Now Fridays was a busy day for a few reasons, but not least, because both of us were supposed to be in, so certain tasks were scheduled for then, and operations involving other people or certain aspects of quality were tailored to fit around this. That is, there were too many jobs for one person to do in the regular day. Now, at the time I'd graduated uni, was back living in my garbage town that I thought I'd escaped, with no plans or expectations for my future. With my parents who, as nice as they are, still expected me to abide to the limited freedoms I'd had before the sex, drugs, and rock and roll a very average undergraduate degree permits. I was also in the messy death throes of an hour-long distance relationship. As a result, I was a very unhappy bunny, so work and gym were literally the only things I did. The point is, I didn't really mind. Sure, the place was a shithole when I got on shift that first day. Sure, there were loads of stuff undone on the task sheet we had to sign off on. But fuck it, it's all overtime, baby. This woman also had a habit of trying to demean you. It was low level and mostly one-to-one, but it fucked me right off, given that she was lucky to be there, and I felt I was hitting well below my potential. Even as a graduate, I was essentially the lowest paid employee, given that the others were either management or had to work nights, so received night shift pay. However, one day we had an inspector come in, and she remarked on a particular intricate task that I'd done, and said it was done expertly well. That was red rag to a bull for this woman. Oh, it's the only thing they teach them at college. In my county it's called university. College is the thing 2 years before that. Yet another little dig. Anyway, I go on leave for a few weeks and the cow can't pull her usual stunt of bunking off and having me cover. Obviously our space in the factory was held by the time I got back. I guess me going away pissed her off loads, because when I came back, my boss, who was a nice bloke, but also a friend of this woman, sat me down and said, I know she shouldn't have, and I've told her off for it, but while you were away, woman, went into your pigeonhole and pulled out your timesheet. It seems like you've been doing a lot of overtime, and, woman, was going on about how she doesn't need to do overtime and that maybe you should speed up like her. What do you have to say about that? Now, this was the first time anyone had ever complained about me in the workplace, so I was kinda blindsided. I just sort of said that there were a lot of things to do, and some days were busier than others, and then I actually thought about why I'd had busy days, and told the boss, well, obviously it's difficult to manage when you're continuously down on a Friday. Then I showed him the logs of all the jobs we'd do, and how my initials appeared twice as many times as hers, regardless of what shift we were on. Now, as I said, boss man wasn't a bad guy. In fact, turns out boss man was such a good guy that woman had previously worked in this very same factory years before I started, but had some personal problems which ended up in her getting fired for missing days and not pulling her weight. Apparently the boss stuck his neck out for her, and after she'd promised him she'd sorted her life out, rehired her under strict warning she'd not pull that shit again. After checking over her leave to confirm what I was saying, they started disciplinary procedures that would pretty quickly get her fired again. It wasn't straight away, but her trying to make me look bad really backfired on her. The job paid reasonable if you consider the hours and the fact she left school at 16 and was working a job advertised as graduate entry. Soon after this all came to light, I left to do a master's course before she actually got fired, but the girl who replaced me couldn't have been nicer, and I think the bosses took extra care not to have another employee want to leave because of this woman. That wasn't my reason, but I'm pretty sure they believed it was, given the timings. Weirdly enough, I get a text from her about 2 weeks after leaving work, wanting to know my address. She has been banging on incessantly towards the end about her wedding. So I texted her back my address, and sure enough, she's invited me to the whole day. Needless to say, that went in the bin and I never heard from her again. It blows my mind how oblivious dumb people can be. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. If you would like to see more, feel free to subscribe.